Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's episode of A New Thing. And today's episode is going to be pretty short and sweet because my whole point, I think, is mostly just to do a very kind of quick Bible study comparison to make a point because something's been on my mind. So, over the past 2 months or so, I've been pen paling with a Jehovah's Witness from California. He reached out to the church via letter, and so I've sent him one back and things like that. And for anyone who doesn't know, Jehovah's Witnesses, I would not say are Christian, and there are lots of reasons for this, but primarily because of what they believe about Jesus. They believe Jesus was or is an angel, specifically Michael. They see them as being the same person in Scripture, which they aren't alone in thinking. In the sense of that some people think that the Michael referenced in the book of Daniel is a pre-incarnate Christ. Of course, there are many people who would still claim that that is God, like in the Son. But the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe that Jesus is God's Son in the sense of being a divine being, being as divine as Yahweh or Jehovah, as they would say. And that obviously puts them apart from mainstream Christianity, which is very clear on claiming that Jesus is divine, that he is Yahweh. And you see this, I would say, very clearly in the New Testament. Not a whole lot of debate, I think, to be had on that point, but of course there is a lot of debate because, maybe that's my own bias and things like that. But I want to say that that's been on my mind because I've just been having conversation and a debate that was dropped on YouTube this week between Alex O'Connor, who is an atheistic thinker, but not a cringy one. I think he's pretty good. And David Wood, who's a Christian apologist, who usually deals with Christian-Muslim relations, but also does other ones. They debated whether or not Jesus ever claimed to be God. Which is a very odd thing. For anyone who doesn't know, this is one of the new trendy things in kind of academia, is to claim that Jesus never claimed to be God. And of course, I think there's serious problems with that. But all of that leads me to today, which is that I think a lot of these problems, these ways of thinking, can easily be dealt with when we know our Old Testament really well. And I know the Old Testament is often not given a lot of time in Christian circles for a lot of reasons. It's pretty complex. It's very foreign in the sense that the names can be kind of hard for us to pronounce. The narratives are not always very clear when it comes to how do we tell who's acting, what's going on, right? It's written kind of this old epic style that is very kind of different from the Gospels, and the Gospels are, I think, a little closer, not unsurprisingly, to the way that we write today due to their, historical influence on writing in Western culture. And so it's really hard for a lot of people to grasp a lot of what's going on in the Old Testament, especially when you get into the prophecies and things like that, right? It feels like you need a theology degree in order to look at it, but I'm telling you, you don't. Does it help? Sure, right? Yeah, it's great if you can go to seminary and study and do all these other things, and I know that there are a lot of people who wish that they could do that, right? Just have that free time or extra money to go and do that, and it's a good thing to do, right? But I don't think you need to, right? I don't think that you need to do all these things to understand the references and the point, especially today when we have study Bibles and so many great tools and things like that. So all that being said, what I want to do is I want to focus on a section of Revelation today. Revelation 1, so it's right at the beginning, right? So let me just pull this up for us. So this is Revelation 1. You can see on the left over there I have the text, English text from the ESV. On the right I have the Greek. We don't need to worry too much about the Greek unless you want to read it, which is great. So in this, right, we see this is at the very beginning, so of Revelation, the Apocalypse of John, and he's greeting the churches, right? And then he talks about how he has a vision, and he has a vision of the Son of Man. So already, like, Son of Man is an Old Testament phrase. It comes from the book of Daniel. This is actually Jesus' favorite way to refer to himself. And so if we are New Testament people, if we like Jesus and we want to know what he has to say, and the fact that he is calling himself the Son of Man really should cause us to go, okay, what does that mean? Something that should be noted is that Jesus doesn't deny being the Messiah when that happens and when people call him the Messiah, but in fact he praises Peter and some other people when they do that. But he doesn't actually use that title to refer to himself a lot, and there's a lot of speculation about why that is. Personally, I find the idea that Jesus knows that people at the time misunderstand what his job is going to be, especially what the Messiah's job is going to be. So he kind of refrains from using that term, not because it's incorrect to call him that, but because of what it's going to make people think, right? They're going to think that it's a political thing, but Jesus is not really about that. So instead, he prefers the Son of Man because he's making a claim about who he is, making sure everyone knows, but also showing that, this is the messianic prophecy being fulfilled. So anyway, the Son of Man, right? So the Son of Man appears in the book of Daniel. So this is Daniel 7. He has the vision of the four beasts. I'm sorry. Daniel 10 is... we're going to go to Daniel 7. So that's why I wanted to... So you see here, it says Daniel's terrifying vision of the Son of Man. And the Son of Man is this person he sees. A man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. And he describes this, right? And this is much of this. The way that he's described is in a as like this divine figure, the Son of Man, right? So we have this idea, right? And then if we go to Revelation, which is where John sees a vision of the Son of Man, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities here. So he hears a voice, and then he says, I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were aflame like fire. His feet were burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun, shining in full strength. So, right, when we see this, we can see the similarities, right? You see the gold sash, you see the robe, you see the idea of the multitude, right? The voice of the waters, things like that, right? Very, similarities here. And like, this shouldn't really surprise us. He's describing the Son of Man here. Daniel's describing the Son of Man. One of my seminary professors said that if you got Revelation as a paper, you would mark it as plagiarism because it takes so much from the book of Daniel and from other places, right? That was kind of his joke about it. And many times just actually copying word for word. Of course, Daniel's written in Hebrew, and the Revelation is written in Greek. But taking these ideas and just putting them into the text, right? But this is where it's really interesting, especially when it claims, because, all right, so we know that this is describing the Son of Man. He says that, one like a son of man. And then we see in Daniel, it's the Son of Man. But then there's other characteristics in here that are really interesting. So if we go to Daniel 7, this is where I went the first time. So he has the vision of the 4 beasts, and then he sees the Ancient of Days. The Ancient of Days is God, right? And he's reigning, so this is the Lord. Right? And this is how he describes the Lord. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out before him, and thousands served him. And 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Now, if you know Revelation, you can see all the similarities just from that passage, right? But if we go just to the description of the Son of Man, notice how he's described. So he does have some similarities to the way he's described in Daniel 10, but there's also other things, right? You have this burnished bronze, for instance. It's describing the chariot that Yahweh rides, that the Ancient of Days rides in Daniel 10. But also, you'll see that the hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. And of course, his eyes were like a flame of fire. Fire in the Hebrew Bible is a purifying thing, right? It is used for burning away impurities, and that's used quite a bit. And you'll see again, refined like a furnace. So there's all these similarities that are kind of coming together to describe this figure. It's the Son of Man, but you'll notice that he has attributes both of the Son of Man in Daniel and of the Ancient of Days. Now, of course, this is describing the person of the Son, but what is it saying about the person of the Son? And this is like why the Old Testament is so fascinating to read in the New, because of course, and just to be very clear, for the first quite a while in church history, by at least the records that we have, is that the scriptures was the Old Testament, and that was kind of it. And then as gospels began to get spread around, and this was of course very early on, still this is all first century, then they would start reading from one of them as well about Jesus, and from other books of the New Testament, letters of Paul, things like that, right? We know in scripture itself that Paul's letters had already become something that were being shared among churches, which is great. But they knew their Old Testament really well. And so we neglect it to our own peril today, because we leave ourselves open to really bad theology if we aren't being consistent across the Bible, right? Now, of course, like I'm sure if you were to talk to a Jehovah's Witness, they would have ways of getting around it, right? Saying something like, oh, this is Jesus, but he's been given authority to look this way, or something like that, right? Is that in the text? No, right? But that's their kind of theological baggage that they're bringing in. The whole point, right, that I always wish for everyone in the church is that that I'm here to be kind of a facilitator to help you guys get there, but I don't think anyone should need me ultimately at the end of the day, right? Of course, as a spiritual advisor, as a teacher, I hope to be needed. But at the same time, right, like I think it would be best if we lived in community and we didn't need to rely on one person to carry kind of the intellectual weight. And not saying I do. There are many smart people in this church. All of this is just me getting at the idea that we need to know our scripture really well, because you'll be shocked at how, if you know scripture well, you are able to just cut through a lot of the difficulties and supposed things that people say. So I really just want to encourage you, especially with the Old Testament. I know we're going through our Bible in the year plan, not in a year, but in, however, year and a half, maybe, I don't know. But we are going to eventually, we're still in the Old Testament. And so as we're going through this, really, really pay attention to the descriptions and things like that are being used to talk about God and the power that God has, because it really is going to guide your thinking when you get to the New Testament and you start to see the claims that are being made about Jesus. So that's all I have for today, right? I mean, I'm not going to take too much of your guys' time. I really want to thank you for listening, to those who did, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. I'll see you on Sunday for worship. Peace out.